Fame feels permanent when the lights are bright and the crowd is screaming your name. It feels untouchable, like nothing can reach it. But history tells a different story. Sometimes it only takes one sentence, one decision, one moment no one can take back, and everything changes. Not slowly, not over years, instantly. Tonight we're counting down 15 singers from the 70s and 80s whose careers didn't fade, they snapped. Number 15. Donnie Osmond, 1978. In the 1970s, Donnie Osmond wasn't just popular, he was a phenomenon, a carefully crafted image of innocence, the ultimate teen idol. Posters on bedroom walls, sold-out tours, a fan base built on one simple illusion. He was available. He belonged to them. Then in 1978, he made a completely normal decision. He got engaged. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Fan mail slowed, concert energy cooled, the screaming crowds became quieter. Because in the world of teen stardom, fantasy matters more than reality. He didn't scandalize anyone. He didn't break the law. He simply grew up. But his audience wasn't ready for that version of him. That single announcement ended the version of Donnie Osmond that had made him a star. The lesson here isn't about controversy. It's about perception. When your entire career is built on an image, even a healthy life decision can feel like betrayal to the people who made you famous. Number 14. Sonny and Cher, 1975. Sonny and Cher didn't just sell music. They sold a relationship, a fantasy, a perfect harmony between two people both on stage and off. Their chemistry wasn't just entertainment, it was the product. And then, in 1975, Cher filed for divorce. The moment that news broke, the brand collapsed. Their television empire depended on that image. The Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour wasn't just a show, it was a performance of love. Once the reality behind it cracked, the audience couldn't separate the art from the truth anymore. The duo split, the show ended, the magic disappeared almost overnight. This wasn't about talent. Both of them remained successful individually. But together they represented something bigger than music. And once that illusion died, there was no version of the act that could replace it. Sometimes the career doesn't end because of failure. It ends because the idea people believed in no longer exists. Number 13. Van Morrison, 1970s. Van Morrison had something most artists spend entire careers chasing: credibility. Not just popularity, not just chart success, but respect. The kind that turns albums into statements and songs into something almost spiritual. By the early 1970s, he had already built that foundation. A voice that felt raw and unpredictable. A presence that didn't need theatrics to command attention. But that unpredictability started to work against him. On stage, he became inconsistent. Some nights he delivered performances that felt transcendent. Other nights he seemed completely disengaged, turning away from the audience, rushing through songs, refusing to connect. Fans didn't know what version of him they were going to get, and that uncertainty slowly turned into hesitation. Promoters became cautious. Audiences grew wary. Because live performance isn't just about talent, it's about trust. And once that trust is broken even quietly, it changes everything. He didn't implode in scandal. He didn't disappear overnight. He simply became someone people couldn't rely on. And in the music business, that kind of doubt spreads faster than any headline. Number 12. The Monkees, 1968. The Monkees were never just a band. They were a phenomenon built for mass appeal. Television stars, chart toppers, a perfectly engineered success story that dominated pop culture in the late 60s. But success came with a label they couldn't escape, manufactured, and they wanted to break free from it. So they made a decision that felt bold, almost rebellious. They created a film called Head, a project designed to dismantle their own image, to prove they were more than what people thought. But the audience wasn't ready for that shift. The film was surreal, confusing, self-aware in ways that disconnected the very fans who had made them famous. It didn't feel like an evolution. It felt like rejection. And the reaction was immediate. The film failed. The momentum collapsed. The connection between the band and their audience broke. They tried to redefine themselves too quickly, too aggressively, and in doing so they removed the one thing their success depended on: clarity. When people no longer understand what you are, they stop showing up. Number 11. Creedence Clearwater Revival, 1971. For a brief moment in time, Creedence Clearwater Revival operated like a machine that couldn't fail. Hit after hit. A sound that felt grounded, authentic, unmistakably theirs. But inside that success there was tension building. John Fogerty was the driving force, writing the songs, shaping the direction, controlling the creative output. And while that focus created greatness, it also created resentment. The rest of the band felt sidelined, reduced to supporting roles in something that was supposed to belong to all of them. By 1971, that tension reached its breaking point. Tom Fogerty left. And instead of stabilizing the situation, John made a decision that changed everything. He forced the remaining members to write and perform their own material. It was meant to balance control. It exposed the imbalance instead. The quality dropped immediately. The cohesion disappeared. Critics responded harshly. Fans noticed. Within a year, the band was finished. This wasn't a dramatic explosion. No scandal, no headlines. Just one decision that revealed the cracks that had always been there. And once those cracks were visible, the entire structure collapsed. Number 10. Grace Slick, 1978. By the late 1970s, Grace Slick was no longer the symbol of peace and love people remembered from the 60s. What remained was something sharper, more volatile. A performer whose unpredictability had started to overshadow her talent. And then came Germany in 1978. During a tour with Jefferson Starship, she missed a show entirely. Reports pointed to intoxication. But that was only the beginning. When she returned to the stage, the situation escalated quickly. Tensions backstage turned physical. On stage, she taunted the audience. The atmosphere shifted from excitement to hostility in seconds. The crowd didn't just react, they erupted. Equipment was destroyed. The stage itself was set on fire. What should have been another night on tour turned into chaos that no one could control. Within days, she was fired. This wasn't just about one bad performance. It was about a loss of discipline at the worst possible moment. Touring demands consistency, control, professionalism. And in a single week, Grace Slick crossed a line the industry doesn't forgive easily. From icon to liability, almost instantly. Number 9. Elvis Costello, 1979. Right at the edge of breaking into the American mainstream, Elvis Costello had everything working in his favor. The critics were behind him. The albums were gaining traction. The timing felt perfect. Then one night in a bar changed the trajectory completely. What started as an argument turned into something far worse. Fueled by alcohol and frustration, he used a racial slur while dismissing legendary black artists. It didn't stay in that room. The story spread fast, faster than any promotion could have carried his music. And once it reached the public, the reaction was immediate. Outrage, protests, a shift in how he was perceived almost overnight. He apologized, publicly, repeatedly. But apologies don't move the same way as the original damage. They don't travel as far. They don't hit as hard. What had been a rising career suddenly carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. This wasn't about a pattern of behavior. It was about one sentence. And sometimes, one sentence is enough to change everything. Number 8. Jim Morrison, 1969. Few performers embodied rebellion the way Jim Morrison did. It wasn't just part of his image, it was the core of it. The reason audiences were drawn to him in the first place. But rebellion only works as long as it feels controlled. In Miami in 1969, that control disappeared. The performance started with tension already in the air. Morrison was visibly intoxicated. The crowd was restless. And instead of stabilizing the moment, he pushed it further, taunting, provoking, escalating. Then came the moment that changed everything. Allegations of indecent exposure on stage. Whether fully proven or not didn't matter. The headlines wrote themselves. Charges followed. Court appearances replaced concerts. Promoters backed away. Venues refused to book them. The Doors went from one of the biggest live acts in the country to a risk no one wanted to take. It wasn't a slow decline, it was immediate. One night transformed Morrison from a symbol of rebellion into a legal problem for the entire industry. And once that shift happens, there's no easy way back. Number 7. Sex Pistols, 1978. Chaos can build a legend, but it can't sustain one. The Sex Pistols understood how to shock the system better than anyone in the late 70s. Their attitude, their sound, their refusal to follow any rules. It all felt dangerous in a way that audiences hadn't seen before. But by the time they reached their US tour in 1978, that chaos stopped feeling controlled. Internal tensions were already boiling. Fights between band members became more frequent. Performances started to unravel. What once felt like raw energy now felt unstable. And then came the final moment. On stage in San Francisco, Johnny Rotten looked out at the crowd and asked a question that sounded almost sarcastic. Ever get the feeling you've been cheated? It wasn't sarcasm. It was the end. Within days, the band collapsed completely. No dramatic farewell, no attempt to repair the damage. The very thing that made them iconic destroyed them. Because rebellion without structure eventually turns inward. And when it doesn't just challenge the system, it tears itself apart. Number 6. Leif Garrett, 1979. At the height of his fame, Leif Garrett represented something very specific: youth, innocence, a carefully protected image that millions of fans believed in without question. Then one night on a California road changed everything. Driving with his best friend in the passenger seat, he lost control of the car. The crash was violent, sudden, the kind of moment that divides life into before and after. He survived. His friend didn't walk away the same, paralyzed. The consequences didn't end at the scene of the accident. They followed him, publicly, legally, personally. The guilt became part of his story in a way that couldn't be separated from his career. The image of the perfect teen idol didn't just crack, it disappeared. This wasn't about scandal or controversy in the traditional sense. It was something heavier, something real. And when reality replaces fantasy that completely, the version of the artist people connected with no longer exists. One moment didn't just change his career, it changed how the world saw him forever. Number 5. Keith Moon, 1970. There are artists who live recklessly, and then there was Keith Moon. As the drummer for The Who, he built a reputation around chaos, destruction, a kind of energy that felt limitless both on stage and off. It was part of his identity, almost expected, until one night in 1970 when that chaos crossed into something irreversible. Outside a pub in England, a crowd gathered. Tensions rose quickly. In the confusion, Moon tried to drive away from the situation, and in that moment, his car struck and killed his own bodyguard, a close friend. The incident was ruled accidental, but that didn't change what happened. From that point forward, something shifted. His behavior became more erratic. The drinking intensified. The sense that consequences didn't apply to him disappeared. This wasn't the kind of moment that ends a career overnight in the public eye. It's the kind that erodes it from the inside. Because some events don't explode, they linger. And over time, they reshape everything that comes after. Number 4. Donna Summer, 1983. At her peak, Donna Summer wasn't just successful, she was untouchable, the voice of an entire era. Disco didn't just belong to her, it moved because of her. And more importantly, her core audience knew it. The clubs, the DJs, the communities that built that movement stood behind her completely. That connection was real, earned over years of music and presence. Then, in 1983, everything shifted. During a concert in Atlantic City, reports surfaced that she made remarks linking AIDS to divine punishment. The exact wording was never confirmed. No recording existed, but the reaction didn't wait for proof. Gay clubs banned her music almost overnight. Protests followed. Fans who had supported her from the beginning turned away. She responded, denied it, apologized, tried to repair the damage. But there's a reality to moments like this. The accusation travels fast. The correction doesn't. Even as her music continued to exist, the momentum she once had was gone. This wasn't about talent fading. It was about trust breaking. And once that connection with your audience is damaged at that level, it rarely returns the same way again. Number 3. James Brown, 1988. Legends aren't supposed to fall, especially not someone like James Brown. Decades of influence, a catalog that shaped entire genres, a presence that felt larger than music itself. He wasn't just an artist, he was an institution, which is why what happened in 1988 felt so shocking. It started with something almost surreal. He arrived at a business property he owned and believed someone had used his private space. What followed escalated beyond anything anyone expected. Armed, agitated, driving at high speed. A police chase stretched across state lines. Shots were fired. His vehicle riddled with bullets before he was finally stopped. When it ended, he was arrested, charged, convicted. The image changed instantly, from pioneer to headline, from symbol to cautionary story. He continued performing, continued appearing, but the narrative had shifted permanently. Because moments like that don't just exist as events, they redefine how history remembers you. And for someone who had built a legacy over decades, it took one night to rewrite the conversation. Number 2. Rick James, 1991. Some careers don't collapse because of one mistake. They collapse because of years of behavior finally catching up all at once. Rick James built his image on excess, confidence, a kind of unapologetic presence that felt larger than life. And for a while it worked. But by the early 90s, that lifestyle had taken control. In 1991, everything came crashing down. He was arrested on serious charges involving violence and imprisonment. The details were disturbing, far beyond the kind of controversy a public figure can recover from easily. The headlines didn't just damage his career, they erased his credibility. He served time, attempted a comeback later, but there are lines in the public eye that once crossed change everything permanently. This was one of them. Talent doesn't disappear, but perception does. And when the story surrounding you becomes stronger than the work you created, the career that existed before it can't survive in the same form. One moment didn't just interrupt his success. It ended the version of Rick James the world had accepted. Number 1. Terence Trent D'Arby, 1989. Every once in a while, an artist arrives with so much talent it feels undeniable. That was Terence Trent D'Arby in 1987, a debut album that exploded globally, millions of copies sold, a Grammy win, a voice that felt like it could define a generation. And then came the moment that changed everything. It wasn't a scandal, it wasn't a crime, it was something quieter, more dangerous. Confidence turned into arrogance. In interviews, he didn't just praise his work, he elevated it above history, comparing his debut to one of the most iconic albums ever made, setting expectations no artist could realistically meet twice. Then his second album arrived in 1989. It didn't connect. The audience didn't follow. The momentum disappeared almost immediately. Because once you define yourself as extraordinary, anything less feels like failure. The gap between his self-image and public response became impossible to close. He didn't lose his talent, he lost the narrative. And in the music industry, narrative is everything. Fame can feel permanent when you're inside it, but as these stories show, it can vanish in a single moment. One decision, one sentence, one night that changes everything. Some recovered, most didn't. And some are remembered forever for the second it all went wrong.